It's easily in excess of $30 billion.
In my testimony, I described also, outside of Minnesota, the manifold ways that this administration is enabling fraud.
I get you want to testify how much you hate Donald Trump. But I'm quite certain Donald Trump was not running a fraudulent daycare center.
The public interest isn't your interest at all. It is not your interest at all. You use racism as an attempt to intimidate people to get your way. Your words that don't mean anything aren't going to stop what's coming. And I want you to take that back to George Soros and all these ridiculous funders you have to try to muddle the issue, because justice is coming.
So there was a really good hearing today in the Senate on all of this Minnesota, Minneapolis, Somali fraud. Senators looking into trying to figure out exactly how much of this fraud could be going on throughout our entire country. It's a story that reminds people that there really are almost no safeguards on the trillions of dollars that you send to Washington every year, just how much of our money gets lit on fire, and how very few people really seem to care. And thankfully, it seems like that's changing. This is a story that makes people wonder why in the hell they pay taxes every year, to be honest, if so much of their money is going to be lit on fire. Think about how much more you'd have for yourself if you didn't have to send all that money to be wasted. Senator Ted Cruz was one of the stars of the show today, and he joins us now from the Capitol. Sir, it's good to see you. What was the major takeaway that we found? And you know, as how widespread do you believe this is throughout the country, what we see in Minneapolis?
Well, the hearing that I chaired this afternoon was focusing on the massive fraud we saw in Minnesota, and fraud that I believe is replicated in states across the country. In Minnesota alone, in recent years, we've had a total of $18 billion that has been spent through various welfare programs, and upwards of $9 billion of that may well have been fraud. We've got federal prosecutors prosecuting Somali fraudsters. And the hearing today detailed how the elected Democrats in Minnesota, they knew about the fraud, that they were screaming red lights and warning signs everywhere. Look, these are daycare centers that had no kids, that had no play toys, that had no playground equipment, that the windows are all blacked out, that were dark and empty, and yet the Democrats were sending millions and millions of dollars to these fraudulent centers. And the reason the Democrats were doing that is because they benefited politically. They benefited from votes from the Somali community, and they benefited from campaign money from the Somali community. It was corrupt. And I'll tell you, Rob, I invited the governor, Tim Walz, to come testify before the hearing. I invited the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, to testify. I invited Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey to come testify. They all said no. They're all running and hiding because they were complicit in a grotesque abuse of public trust.
And you know what's so wild is listening to, I mean, so many of these people are now screaming that this is a fake story, and that they're screaming that it's racist to even investigate this. I mean, it's surreal to see the reaction from your political opponents.
Well, and look at the hearing. The Democrat senators who came to the hearing, they wanted to talk about absolutely anything except for the fraud in Minnesota. And so Sheldon Whitehouse, who's the ranking member on the subcommittee, he gave a long speech about how Donald Trump is terrible and about global warming. And at the end of it, he even miraculously, a Democrat discovered the Sermon on the Mount. He was quoting Jesus. He wanted to talk about everything except the fact that Somali fraudsters and Democrats stole $9 billion from the taxpayers. And by the way, didn't just steal it. Those Somalis sent billions back to Somalia, and much of it flowed to Al-Shabaab, the radical Islamist terrorist group. The single largest funder of Al-Shabaab was the Minnesota taxpayer.
Worst possible place that it could go. The worst possible hands our money could end up in. That's what's so insulting about it. I want to get one more question to you about the SAVE Act. I talked about this extensively last night, how important this is. Proof of citizenship to vote, IDs to vote, cleaning the voter rolls, making sure only citizens are voting in our elections. J.D. Vance now saying the Senate must nuke the filibuster in order to get this done. But the leader, the Senate leader, John Thune, in my opinion, in his news conference yesterday, seemed somewhat disinterested in doing that. What is the feeling in the Senate today? Because this is something I think that should be mandatory.
Yeah, look, I'm a passionate supporter of the SAVE Act. I am a sponsor of it. I'm fighting for it. I think it's critical. Protecting election integrity is critical. What I'm urging my colleagues is that we should nuke what's called the zombie filibuster, which is the ability for Democrats to filibuster it without lifting a finger, and that we should require an old-fashioned talking filibuster, require them to stand up and talk and talk and talk, and we can use procedural tools to make it incredibly painful for Democrats to try to block this. That's the case I'm making to my colleagues. I think a number of my colleagues are supporting me in that. I hope we do that because that's a tool to force a vote and to get the SAVE Act passed.
And real quick, is Thune open to this, or is, how is he feeling?
I would say it's an open discussion right now. To be able to do it, we have to get at least 50 Republicans on the same page. At lunch today, I was leaning in hard. Several others were, and I think we're trying to make the case to our colleagues. We need to bring everyone together to do this.
Understood. Senator Ted Cruz, good to see you. Thanks so much.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmidt tonight on Newsmax.